So I just put up a poll for everyone on cats or dogs. I grew up with a cat and a dog, so I always enjoyed having both. I live in an apartment, as I imagine many other people may, if you're in a city. And so having a dog, especially if you live alone, is a bit more of a challenge. So I don't have a dog. I'd love to have a dog. um, but that will be for another time. Wow, I'm outnumbered, unless, depending on what people mean by do I have to pick one, that either means you're allergic to cats, you're not an animal person, or you like them both. So I'll leave that vague so I don't feel too judged by anyone, but thanks for humoring me on that poll. We have about, let's see, almost 10 people, about I think 20 signed up. I always expect about half to be in based on just how online events work. I know that, we're at this situation where I think we're all probably so over Zoomed. And I would classify myself in that too. I even was last night on a board meeting, a new board that I'm on, which I'm really excited to be helping out with the community in Vancouver. But that was from 6:30 till 8:30 p.m. And so I totally get how zoomed out you could be. So my goal here is to make this as pleasant as possible, but you all know that you're here because we're talking about taxes. So to get started, I would just like to introduce myself for some people who may not be familiar with who I am. I know that this event was shared out just to the general public a bit as well. This is primarily targeting our clients at Timber, but it's good advice for anyone who has to do their taxes this year and you're self-employed or have your own business, so single owner business or freelancer. So my name is Luke Frye. I'm a Washington State CPA, and I am the co-founder, along with my business partner, Ann Chan, of Timber Tax. I'm going to just make sure I have my chat open separately, make sure any tech issues get resolved. Awesome. So Ann is in Seattle. I was in Seattle for a while. I decided I want to be back in Vancouver just because this is where I feel at home. And I think that's just part of the great thing of most of us working for ourselves or doing our own thing somehow. We have that luxury to be able to pick where we live a bit more. So I definitely want to make sure that you feel supported and encouraged as we enter into this tax season. The goal, it might be safer, Jeff. The goal really for 2021 with Timber is to eliminate as much uncertainty as possible. I don't want to use words like unprecedented or COVID and pandemic, but we all know that completely rocked our world. We went into tax season last year and we're really focused on getting everything done for you. And then the tax deadline moved and then PPP money came out. And so that's where we switched all of our time. We helped clients get close to $1 million in PPP money. We didn't charge anyone to help them get the money. It was like a whole extra tax season, right? So we're so grateful that we had the ability to do that. And now we're in this follow-up mode of, okay, how do we deal with all that stuff? I know some people may have already, I don't see anyone here who's submitted forgiveness applications, but if you've submitted an application for forgiveness and feel comfortable sharing in the chat, I'd love to see that response in the chat. That's definitely something that we're going to take into account as we do your tax return. So that will be an item we go through. But what I'm going to do is I have a presentation that we put together for you. Before I dive into that, I'm also going to paste a couple links for you that should be handy resources. You can follow along with me as I'm going through the presentation. You could also just grab these PDFs and say sayonara. If you feel like you're over zoomed, I won't be offended, but you'll miss some of my cheesy jokes. So I'll first start by sharing the one pager. So this is something that you should feel confident to print, put on your refrigerator. It should be more or less the same every year as far as documents. And I'm going to now jump and grab the longer booklet that we also put together for you. And then if anyone can let me know that they were able to successfully grab that, I would appreciate it. See if that's, yeah, okay, good. This presentation I'm about to go through is essentially the highly detailed version of that. So I'm gonna not seeing it. Anna says not seeing it. I pasted a link in the chat just above where I'm seeing your messages. So this might be a Zoom learning for me as much as it is for you. Okay, Wendy posted it. There's a link there. Hopefully, okay, you're able to see it. Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. I don't know why when I pasted it, it's not visible, but I'm glad that you are able to. Thanks. Okay, I think you just had the better link. Okay, so if you have those open, maybe you want to print it out so you can write on it. Maybe you are a Power PDF user and you want to annotate as you go there. But our goal with this is, especially if you're a client of Timber, to try and eliminate as much uncertainty as possible. And a component of that is helping you understand what we need in order to do your taxes. And what we're planning to roll out is an assigned filing date. We no longer want to rely on the due dates according to the IRS. We want to be even more proactive with that. So in the next week or two, if you're a client of ours, we're going to be sending you your assigned filing date. And that date is going to come with a couple things. You're going to have a meeting with Wendy a couple weeks before the filing date. And then you'll be going back and forth with May Kay, who is our newest CPA. So if you haven't had a chance to see that in the newsletter, May Kay is a New York CPA, so we are definitely proud of her. And then finally, we'll either have a video chat with me, kind of like this, obviously not a webinar presentation, but a Zoom or a video. So that's the cadence we're going to be going on. If you haven't already let us know that you want to get an extension and you would prefer one, please let us know, because then we'll just slot you in for sometime between May and August as well. So I'm optimistic that people who want to follow along with a document have it open, and I am going to jump now into the actual presentation I have for you. And I'll keep this chat open for when I see questions pop up. Feel free to throw them in there. I may not answer them right away, but I'll certainly work to make sure that we cover anything. So because you guys are all being so helpful, I would appreciate you letting me know that you can see this keynote now that I flip over to. Awesome, thank you. Wonderful. So I know this is the most boring possible title for a presentation. I apologize, but the reality is there are some forms that we need, and I just want to help dissect some of them. And okay, I assume that's just a delivery from Amazon that's knocking at my door. Of course, that's when a delivery would come. So I'm just going to walk through this presentation with you. And this is, if you're following along on the PDF, it should be the same thing. So the number one biggest problem we have with any tax season is financials. We have such a hard time getting business financials from people, primarily just because of communication with clients, bookkeepers. Somebody's still knocking on my door, so I might actually have to pause. I apologize so much, but I think we all know that's kind of the world we live in, working from home. So I will encourage you to look at the presentation, the handout that I Okay, so now the only other thing that will go wrong is the cats will freak out and then I'll have to get them out too. So hopefully you had a moment to look at the PDFs I had there for you. But essentially, business financials. I say those because I have an accounting degree and I just assume you know what I'm talking about. Business financials are actually your income statement and your balance sheet. Okay. We also need your general ledger. These are things that if you're working with a bookkeeper, you really don't even have to know the details of what we get, but it's the results of your financials for the whole previous year. Bookkeepers essentially right now are in panic mode because they're trying to wrap up everything for year end in order to help you send out your 1099s. So 1099s are something we're going to talk about. 1099s are not something that we send out for you. They're something that you either need to send out yourself or have your bookkeeper send out. So business financials is really the most important thing. You should be contacting your bookkeeper. We're also going to be contacting your bookkeeper, trying to prioritize when can all of the transactions be reconciled, when can you review them together with your bookkeeper in order to make sure that they're done. Okay, so we use the financials in your tax return. The difference is book accounting versus tax accounting. And if we don't get them, there's no way for us to do your return. And we won't even be able to do a good extension for you either. Ideally, you're set up on Xero or QuickBooks, and you're able to update those every month. I would love to hear from you all if this is something that you're updating every month, or is it something you're waiting to the end of the year or the end of the quarter on. Judy says monthly. That's really great. I know some people often wait until there's a quarterly basis, but the closer you can stay to monthly, yeah, Tara, definitely appreciate that context as far as just, you know, the more up to date you are, the easier it is, because I can't remember what happened last year. And because of this year that we've had, it's going to be even more challenging. So the more up to date you are, if you got nothing else from today and you just decided, you know what, maybe I should work with my bookkeeper every month to make sure they're up to date, that would be so valuable. So I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. But if you have any questions about what business financials are, go ahead and paste it in here. If we have access to your account, we'll grab what we need. We just need to know these are done, because the only thing worse than not having the financials is using the wrong ones if they're not finished or you haven't reviewed them. Okay, on to 1095s. So 1095s are healthcare forms. These show when you had coverage for health insurance. The reason we need these, this is a huge trap, and I believe that Biden, tomorrow is inauguration. I think one of the first things he's going to do is pass some sort of an additional stimulus to at least top up the $2,000 payment from the $600 that was most recently sent out. As a component of that, I believe he's also going to change how the Obamacare qualifies people for this premium tax credit. So if you got health insurance from the marketplace, that means that you were below this threshold and then the government subsidized your health insurance. Okay, so it's working a little bit more towards a single payer model of sort. Now, it's really great if you're filling out this info and your numbers are down from last year and you expect to be down this year too, and then you qualify for this premium tax credit. The trap is when we file your tax return, we reconcile what they paid you based on what you guessed you were going to make and what you actually earned. So if you actually earned above the threshold of what you qualified for, you're going to owe back that premium tax credit. Okay, so when I say premium tax credit, I mean money for health insurance that the government paid on your behalf. It's super confusing because you never actually received it. It was just sent to the insurance company for you. Okay, so 1095s show that information. Also, it just shows what months you're covered, because there is that penalty that may apply if you don't have health insurance coverage or there's too big of a gap. So 1095s, where do we get them? They should either be mailed to you or in your health insurance online login. So you should have some sort of an online login for your health insurance plan that will allow you to grab those 1095s. So I'm still watching the chat. If you have questions on health insurance or 1095s, go ahead and throw it in there and we can go over that. I assume everything is the 31st, Judy. Thanks for the question. It is possible that the 1095s would come out later. I would encourage you to expect them by the 31st or the first week after. So 1099 NEC, this is a new form this year, but it's very familiar. This is the one that we all every year have to think back and say, who needs to get a 1099? So anyone you paid $600 or more via cash, check, or personal payment provider of some sort. This is for people who might otherwise be considered like an employee, but they're not. And so you need to send them a 1099. In order to send them a 1099, you need their tax ID number, which would be like their social security number, or an EIN in some cases if they're an S corporation. And that W-9 will then have all the info you need to send them a 1099. I recommend track1099.com. So I'll post that link in here, track1099.com. That's a really great service, very cheap, very fast. You can do that all via email. We do not need the 1099s that you sent to contractors. We do need to know that you sent them if you were required to. So here's the confusing part. We do need the 1099s that you received. So this is really the start of a huge list of different 1099s that we need from you when you receive them. Because if you are issued a 1099 and we don't enter it, there's a high chance that you're going to actually be able to, oh, I'm seeing what I'm doing wrong, Wendy, thanks. There's a big chance that you'll receive a letter from the IRS, and then we'll have to send a note back and just say, oh, actually, you know, he did get this 1099 and we'd like to update it, or worst case scenario, you have to amend the return. Anyway, we need 1099s you received. We do not need 1099s that you sent. You do need to save copies of them with your bookkeeper, and you do need to let us know that you sent them if you are required to. Okay, so these 1099 miscellaneous, this is the form you used to send to contractors. So this is not the form you send to contractors anymore. This is for other things, see, rental, royalties, and other withholdings. My guess is most of you will not send any of these. So this is the form you used to send to contractors that I'm assuming most of you will not send. You'll be sending this 1099 NEC instead. There's a chance, because this is there's so many things that changed this year. I bet some of you will end up getting 1099 miscellaneous forms erroneously. If you do, just send them to us. We'll use those. Again, we're always relying on our client portal, which we're working to update for you if you're one of our clients in the next week. And in that client portal, if you get documents and you just want to upload stuff in advance, you can always just go to tax year 2020 documents and upload the document. We really appreciate when you title a document consistent with the title of the document. So whatever is written on the PDF that's being uploaded, type that as the title and upload it to 2020. So again, I'm assuming most of you won't get 1099 miscellaneous. So I'm going to move on to one forms that you probably will get. These forms have a later due date usually, and often are one of the most common reasons for extensions. So 1099 INT, we haven't had to give you 1099, so it has changed for 10. So Anis, I'm hoping that what you're meaning is you did not give us the 1099s that you sent. That's right, we don't want copies of those. We don't need them, we just need to know that you sent them. We only need 1099s that you received. So I'm almost certain that you would have received some sort of a notice if you received a 1099 and you didn't get it to us. So we definitely want 1099s that you received to the business or to you personally. So that should be the same as in previous years. So if there's a follow-up question, feel free to post it there, but I'll jump back to the 1099 INT, 1099 div, 1099B. This is something that we really see causing the most delays and having to file extensions because financial institutions delay in sending them. I think the due date is slightly later, but again, the answer for where to get these forms is going to be pretty similar as with your health insurance form. So just log into Vanguard or wherever you have any sort of investments and look for that 1099 consolidated. You may also ask for it sooner. I don't know if that will help, but it should be either mailed to you or available in your online login with your financial institution. So 1099 INT interest, div dividends, B is for trading, and then consolidated is just when they put them all together. Okay. Jumping on to 1099G. So this might be a bit foreign for Washington folks, but there may actually be some of you who receive them if you had some sort of unemployment or grants from the state this year, a 1099G for government. The other reason people receive these is if they have a state income tax refund. So if you got a state income tax refund, then you would also receive a 1099G showing that amount. We definitely need those if you got them. And same for the total unemployment benefits received and withholding set aside. So those are really quite critical for helping us make sure we're getting your return in right without any follow-up issues. Okay, on to 1099R. So Connor, 1099G. So the stimulus check would not be included in the 1099G. The stimulus would come from, good question, Connor. The stimulus is from the IRS, and I actually didn't put a slide in here just on the stimulus because they're still figuring it out. So one thing to keep in mind is if you didn't get a check, there should be a way to get some sort of a credit for it if you deserved to get a check. And that's for either stimulus. So the first one, now the second one or the third one. Excellent question, Emily, on PPP. Good. So the short answer to both of those is no. There is a chance that you'll receive some sort of a 1099 cancellation of debt for the PPP once you're forgiven. But the 1099G would include payments from the state, whereas the PPP and stimulus is all from the feds. So the IRS. When I say federal, I mean IRS, and then Washington would be unemployment. That's a really good question, though. The PPP loan included. I think there might be a cancellation of debt income, 1099, but the latest law that was passed said that that money was not taxable, which was a huge win because when it was first released, we thought that the money received would be taxable, which, then that chips away at how much you actually got. And that has since changed. So it is not taxable. We will definitely need to know if you received a stimulus and how much, and if you didn't, and we'll definitely want to know if you received forgiveness. Those two reasons might be reason enough for you to choose, rather than filing on time, to extend. If you would like to wait longer for more certainty that those numbers are handled in the most updated way, you might choose to extend your tax return because the IRS hasn't even released e-filing, I think, until the February 12th or 15th that week, because the IRS is still figuring a lot of stuff out. And as anyone who's either in DC or is watching stuff that's going on right now, I think the whole city is really focused on a lot of other things right now. In addition to the Treasury actually working to issue stimulus checks, there's a lot of updates happening. So the tax forms and e-filing isn't even ready. We're still going to start preparing returns the week of the 25th. So if you've been assigned the week of the 25th or those 3 weeks, January 25th on, we still want to get everything from you and get the drafts done. But point is, you may prefer to wait so that way you get credit for the stimulus sooner than if we file now and then they say, oh, you can't actually get credit for it until next year. I don't see that happening, but it is something to consider. So I'll move on. 1099R. So if you had a retirement account in 2020, and 2020 was one of those years that there would have been hardship for many people. So you may have taken some cash out of a retirement account. You would have received a 1099R, or you will. Okay, so we need to have these because it shows withholding. It shows withholding if there was any sort of penalty or any other income tax withholding. This would be from something like a 401k, even a Roth IRA, or a traditional IRA. Or a SEP. We set a lot of people up on a SEP. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, well, definitely. And that's part of why your portal this year is taking longer for us to get to you, and why we're encouraging you to book a call with Wendy 2 weeks before your tax filing date to walk you through it, because there are just so many more questions to go through. And I highly encourage you to really dedicate some good, high quality focus time when you fill it out as well as you can. We expect there'll be questions. Exactly, Ennis. We're working on sending those out next week. Primarily just planning through all the timing of this and updating when that e-filing is up, because the IRS, I've been trying to get an EIN for people, and that's still being delayed. So our plan is to send that all out next week. So watch your emails for your tax filing date. And if you have a preference right now, you want to file it on this week because you have scheduled work projects, we'd happily accommodate as much as we can. Our goal is just to eliminate the uncertainty of when am I going to get my taxes done as soon as possible. Same for if we extend you. Let's just pick that date when we're actually filing you right now. So 1099Rs, that would be distributions from retirement accounts. 1099 SAs. So this is if you have a health savings account. So this shows actual money you contributed to the HSA. An HSA can be it can be a good way to save on your taxes if you have healthcare expenses. And setting up an HSA plan isn't too complicated. I do find them to be a bit tedious, just as far as the rules for setting them up and using them for what the actual benefit is. But if you're someone who is happy to be really organized on stuff like this, I think an HSA is a wonderful way to maximize your deductions. Related to the HSA is the 5498 SA. So this is when you take money out of the HSA, just showing that you use it for qualified medical expenses. Those rules are fairly broad as far as what is qualified, but as you can see here, this is just an entire thing to account for with HSAs. I might be moving a little bit quicker here. Oh, okay, we're at 12:30, so that's okay. Just to get through, we're about the halfway mark on the presentation, and I do want to leave open time at the end. So estimated tax payments. This is what you've paid to either the IRS or your state Department of Revenue throughout the year for income tax payments. Okay, so there are 4 quarters. Last year was particularly odd because Q1 was extended to the same date as Q2, which I believe they both were actually pushed to July 15th instead of June 15th. So even though I always say, burn these dates into your memory and then you'll always have them, last year was the year they all changed. So this year, assuming we don't have to defer any deadlines again, those dates will be April 15th for the first quarter, June 15th for the second quarter. You'll notice that that's a shorter window between April and June. And so that will come pretty quickly if we're doing projections for you. Otherwise, when you make safe harbor payments, safe harbor meaning based on your 2020 tax filing for this coming year, upload payment confirmations to your client portal, and then we'll just have them. We want to make sure that you get credit for the taxes you paid. The good news is if you don't upload them and we didn't get it entered in, you'll probably be shocked at how much you owe. And so we'll have a conversation and then we'll eventually get the info we need. But the other thing is the states and IRS is actually pretty good about giving you credit for the tax payments you made. If you don't have an account set up with the IRS, go to the irs.gov even right now. It's actually in the last year or two been quite improved as far as the records you just have instant access to when you set up that account. So I would highly encourage you to do that. So again, we would love to have screenshots or receipts uploaded to your client portal of estimated taxes paid. If we don't get them, you'll end up overpaying, or we'll have just some back and forth. They're probably in your bank account. Most of you should be paying your taxes from a personal account because the LLC or S Corp is actually disregarded and it doesn't pay tax, but it's not illegal or bad to pay it from your business account. On some levels, it's actually better because then we have the record of the payment in your bookkeeping. That bookkeeping transaction should still show it as an owner draw or partner draw or shareholder draw, because income tax is not an expense, which is kind of a silly thing to say, but that's just an accounting thing. Reminder for anyone who hasn't had a presentation from me before, use caution when assuming that tax accounting follows any sort of logic. Tax laws are made by bureaucrats trying to favor their special interests to get elected again, not to be reasonable and logical. So all of that to say, we want to make sure we have your estimated tax payment records so that way you get credit for those payments. If we're working, and I guess one more thing here, if we're working with you ongoing on your projections on a quarterly basis, we get these right away. And we're working to actually do the same sort of thing, even if we're not working with you on a quarterly basis, to make sure that we capture these, that we remind you of when the due dates are, and then when to get us that payment confirmation. So September 15th being the third quarter, and then January 15th is actually the fourth quarter. So we just finished up our fourth quarter projections. So the other document that we need, or file or numbers, is a mileage log for each business vehicle. So if you have more than one vehicle that you use for business, we need separate mileage logs. And what we do is we contemplate the best deduction for you. So we need the total miles driven for the vehicle, and then the business and personal miles. So we need the business miles driven and personal, which gives us the total. Then that gives us a percentage ratio that we can then use to apply to the next slide, which I'll go over. If you use a vehicle regularly, I would encourage you to use Mile IQ, QuickBooks Self-Employed. Also, if somebody uses QuickBooks Online and can confirm, I think QuickBooks Online actually has the functionality now to do mileage as well. But remember, that needs to be kept up to date for each vehicle that you use for business. And this is a vehicle you own. This is a vehicle you personally own. A notebook is also completely fine. It's completely fine if you just use a notebook. This is just a thing that you give us the mileage log, and then we take into account the expenses. If you're audited, you need to have some sort of actual proof. So we really just need the numbers, but for you, to protect you for audit, you need to have that mileage log. And it's a good question about leasing the vehicle. Leasing, I'm qualifying that as in like you personally own it. So that's not totally correct. So you're right. Leasing the vehicle, we still do the same thing where we figure out what is the percentage. So if it's 50% business, that's like 5,000 business miles over 10,000 total miles, then we would apply the same percentage to your lease payment. If it's 100% business, that becomes a lot more simple, and you actually don't even need a mileage log. You just need to be able to say that you use the vehicle 100% for business. Okay, so home office expenses, I guess then I'll make sure that I comment here the expenses that we need. So We need the total cost of operating the vehicle. So if you lease it, it's your lease payments. If it's your payment, then we need the payment breaking out the principal and interest. Insurance, gas. It is not the same thing as saying, okay, I went on a business trip, so I used my business card to pay for gas for that trip. It doesn't work that way. We need all of your gas purchases in order to then calculate the percentage. We use the mileage percentage times all of your vehicle expenses to come up with the deduction. Things that are always deductible in addition to your auto expenses are parking and tolls. So if you're parking, meeting a client in person, remember that. I know some of you actually do in-person photography still, so you may still do this. So if you are parking on a business trip or, you know, a job, project, business lunch, then that parking and those tolls are always 100% deductible. It's the gas and the other maintenance and repairs that is not always deductible. It's based on the percentage of business use. So we really just need two numbers. If you can provide us the two numbers, is the personal miles and business miles for each vehicle, and then total expenses on top of that. Home office actually works very similarly. You can have a home office and a separate office. It is possible. And when you set that up properly, depending on what entity you're in, okay. How do you have to prove 100% business for the car? So, Anis, I would probably suggest, you know, as a taxpayer, the burden of proof is always on you. So whatever would be reasonable as far as, you know, the type of vehicle it is, where the vehicle is stored, the cost of the vehicle in relation to your total income for your business, the actual contract or the payments where the money comes out of. You know, I think those are all several things. But if you have any other specific questions, we can definitely go through that as well. So home office expenses, this is how we get you a deduction for working from home, as most of us probably did even before the pandemic, but especially now. And very similar to your mileage log, we need to have your square footage of your home and the square footage of your home office. That gives us a percentage. We then apply to your rent or your mortgage interest. Your principal, we can't deduct the full amount, but we still need to know your mortgage interest. If you have any homeowners insurance, utilities, that's how we calculate your home office expense, is based on your square footage. I recommend even taping out the floor line if it's in the same room as another room. If you have like more of a loft style place, have a tape measure, take a picture, save that in your records. We don't need that much overkill for doing your taxes. We just need the square footage. But if you're audited, you may have to provide a photo of your home office. Does home office expense include things like computers? Really good question, Emily. So computers and other equipment, like I have a couple lamps here, that would be always based on the business percentage used. So computers can be this middle ground. It's called listed property. So if you use your computer for both personal and business, we would still only deduct part of it, and that's a separate calculation. But if we say you're using this computer 100% business and it's not a personal computer, then that would be separate in addition to home office. So home office has more to do with your personal living space that you're using for business. So if you buy a desk, even if you paint or got some things framed, oh, Emily, I think my photo is too high for you to see there. I meant to have that down more there. If you got a photo that was for your home office, that was dedicated to that, that should be completely and totally deductible. Whereas if it's a computer that you use personally, then you would split it out by percentage. So the biggest items we're really trying to capture here, our goal is to turn some personal things into business expenses, rent expense, mortgage interest, utilities, those sorts of things. And then anything Otherwise, it's ordinary and necessary for your business would be deductible anyway. Okay, so this is what I already ranted about, the home office square footage. So we need to know the square footage of the office, the square footage of your entire home. Okay. Okay, why am I seeing that repeated? Expenses, home office, home square footage. Okay, so this is just walking through the home office square footage and then the home square footage. So that's how we get that fraction or the percentage or ratio. Another thing that we need is your change of address. And this is an example of one of those things that we're just always going to ask you. It's going to be redundant and we're going to make mistakes, which is unfortunate. Just trying to keep up with everyone on their address changes. We really appreciate you just putting it down when we ask for it. But usually if you move to another state, that's a bigger deal. When you're within the same state, I recommend make sure you set up mail forwarding for a year or so because of things like 1099s that are being sent out or 1095s. There's so many different forms and places to update your address that if you move, I highly encourage you just to have the mail forwarding. But for our purposes, we want your updated address so we can send you things like cards, or we can make sure that your refunds, if it was mailed to you, or notices or letters, get sent to you in the right place. So that's definitely a question we put on the portal always. If you had a marital status update, so both getting married or getting divorced, we want to know that info. And we, as far as the tax return goes, only need to know about legal marriages or divorces. So once you're actually divorced or married, certainly there could be times when even if you're married, it could make sense to file separately. Usually that's not the case. If you're in a situation where you would like to make sure that we do that analysis, that's something that we can provide for you currently when we do your return and show you the analysis of, okay, if you filed separately as a married couple, what would your tax be? It's usually a worse scenario. We also need to know if you got any new dependents. So not the four-legged kinds, although I would happily receive any photos of dogs or cats. But this is related to children because you get a bit of a deduction in credit for them. So we'll need to make sure we know dates of birth, social security numbers, and names. Additionally, if you pay for childcare or other expenses to a facility, daycare, we'll definitely want to gather that. If you have a nanny of some sort, you actually would need to have a Schedule H and pay them with that full taxes. Schedule H is very similar to having an employee. Schedule H is where you report household employees, so nannies or mannies. Would also qualify there. If that's something that would apply to you, please let me know, and we need to make sure that is taken care of ongoing. Other documents that we need are for fixed assets. Emily, this actually goes back to your question on home office expenses, including computers. So we need documents showing purchase prices and dates for anything $2,500 or more. So because of the way the IRS treats equipment, anything under $2,500, we usually just expense. Anything over $2,500, we put on the balance sheet, and that stays there until we write it off, which we would write it off when you sell it or throw it away or trade it in. So when those things happen, there is often a taxable event. So you either get credit for your trade-in, and that reduces a gain or loss, or maybe you just sell it outright and then that becomes taxable if you wrote it off. So that probably was a word salad that was overly complicated. All you really need to know is we do want documents for fixed assets, anything over 2,500, so that we can keep that up to date. This is one of those things that is so common to see after, especially like a 20-year filing history or business. You see all these assets of like a Dell computer from 1995. I'm pretty sure that's not still in service. Certainly there might be some situations where that would be the case, but we want to just have some good hygiene around this. And it's actually quite connected to your bookkeeping. So many people actually just tie this directly to the transaction in the bookkeeping, which is my recommendation. So this doesn't then become a separate thing you have to get to us. Okay, so here's another confusing one for you that I want to dissect a bit for you. We do not, as your tax preparers, we're not required to, and we don't even want your receipts for meals, travel, or lodging. I've heard many people say to me in the last year, oh, I use my credit card, so I don't have to have the receipt. Wrong. Wrong. If you are traveling for business, you need to be saving the receipts for meals and lodging in order, if you're audited, to then say, okay, here's my receipt at Canlis. I went and ate with Emily and we talked about a photo shoot. So you need to have, what is the business purpose? Because when we're taking things that are ordinarily personal, eating, and trying to convert it into a business expense, we have to have some sort of a business purpose documented. So who were you with? What was the purpose of the event? You know, we used to go to the ConvertKit conference in Idaho, so we would have some meals there, and that business purpose would be, you know, we were promoting our business, but we were also learning just online business stuff. So a business trip definitely counts. We don't need to enter that info into the tax return, but if we're audited, the IRS is going to say, why did you have a Delta Airlines flight to Idaho? And we just need to make sure that we have some sort of proof of that. So distinction being, we do want receipts for fixed assets, anything over 2,500, ideally in your bookkeeping attached to the transaction. We don't, as your tax preparers, we don't want receipts for business meals and lodging. If you don't have a system set up for tracking these receipts, then talk to me, talk to your bookkeeper, and let's make sure you have one. Yes, Connor, thank you so much. If you have these receipts all uploaded to Xero, the key is just making sure that you have a way to refer back to them and get them if you need somehow. So in Xero is totally fine. That's absolutely great. So that's all the documents I have listed. No, I didn't go over anything on the stimulus or PPP because we're still figuring that out. So this is just an overview of the form names that we try to normalize in your client portal to be accessible and help you understand, okay, what's a 1099 NEC? What's a 1099 MISC? Those sorts of things. So my goal with this is, if you're a little bit more familiar with some of these tax documents, to give you more confidence when you're working with us on getting us what we need, then I am happy. So I would love to hear if any of you feel more confident in knowing your tax forms, or if this was more confusing to you. Did people follow along on either of the PDFs? I'd love to hear any feedback you have on this right now. Okay, so Emily says it was helpful. That is good. Oh, good. I'm glad that it helped. Okay. Yeah, if you have any questions, you know that you can always reach out to me or Wendy. Wendy's really the one who stays on top of my email better than I do, because she helps route things. My email ends up being a little bit of a hub of, you know, Anne needs this info. I don't expect you guys to always know who to reach out to. You should have confidence that if you email one of us, it gets to the right person. But Wendy is definitely a good person to CC on emails for any of these questions. Tara, yes, I will be sharing this recording. I'll probably put it as an unlisted video on YouTube. And then there's also one tonight at 6. So if you weren't totally focused, or you just want to hear my voice again tonight as you're making dinner, you can join again at 6 o'clock. Also, I'd love if you shared this with anyone who you think it would be helpful for. If you're not a client of ours, you can go to timbertax.co and just book an intro call with Wendy and talk about how we might be able to work together. We've also updated our services, and you know, we really try to be intentional about how we build out more than just a tax filing for people. If you have questions about that, book a call with Wendy. Thank you, at timbertax.co. Just book I think it's book an intro call right there. So Judy, yes, I live in Vancouver, British Columbia now. So I was in Seattle for a few years, but I had previously, when I worked in Vancouver, I worked for a web-based bookkeeping company that some of you probably heard of called Bench. And so I was here for almost 5 years. I sometimes forget. And then I went down to Seattle because Anne and I wanted to start a more traditional practice. But I decided to move back to Vancouver. So I am in Vancouver, and my plan and what I was doing yeah, I definitely love Vancouver. Some really gorgeous buildings going up. The term that they've been using, I've heard thrown around, which I think is sort of laughable, is called starchitecture. So a lot of the buildings are really famous architects, and there's just tons of money, which is why I rent in downtown or in the West End, Vancouver. But my goal is to, once we can travel safely again, be in Seattle pretty regularly. And as we're building groups of people in different parts of the country, I actually would love to, meet up with you either in Spokane or in DC or other places where we're building some sort of a presence, because my preference is always to be in person. Hoy, good question. So if there are invoices that weren't sent or processed, how do you handle them in business financials? So most of you file on a cash basis, meaning when you receive the money, we count it as income. And when you pay the money, we count it as an expense. So if you sent an invoice and they didn't pay you, we just don't count that as income. We also don't write it off. We just don't count it as income until you receive it. There are some situations that are worth your time to go through with your bookkeeper when you have things like deposits. So deposits can sometimes still be treated not as income in a cash basis business. There's also this idea of constructive receipt. So I had a couple of people asking, hey, I got a check from a client. I'm actually thinking maybe I will just hold on to it until next year. You can't do that. It's called constructive receipt, and the IRS knows that people try to play that game. So as soon as you receive a check, it counts as income. As soon as you write a check, same way, you could count that as an expense. So work with your bookkeeper to make sure that any of those items are handled in the way I just explained. If you have questions, shoot me a note. Mary, I'm an artist and I charge shipping on sale. So I include that as income and write it off as an expense. Yes, you always count everything in as income. Certainly the net will be the same. And if you're in Washington, there could be an additional B&O tax because Washington has a gross receipts tax for you there. But yes, you would count any sort of reimbursement, maybe tracking it just as a reimbursement ledger. But either way you do it, you just need to make sure that it's all captured there. So that is a similar question to maybe you use something like Stripe to accept credit card payments. You don't receive the full amount because Stripe takes a fee. We still want to record the full $1,000 payment and then the expense out as a merchant fee for that 3%. And so then your total sales is 1,000, but your actual net income is still down that 3%. So yes, count it as income, and yes, write it off as an expense. And if you're working with a bookkeeper, they should be able to advise you on that. If you're looking for a bookkeeper, I have a couple different options for people depending on what it is you need. Awesome. So we have just about 4 minutes. I'm happy to hang out for that long as people have questions. I really appreciate your time. If anyone has any other feedback for me, if you prefer to send me an email privately, the purpose of this is to really help you understand how to work with us, how we can eliminate as much uncertainty as possible around this process and make this as smooth of a tax season as possible for everybody. That's us and you. So if you have ideas or you're just really confused about something I said, please shoot me an email if you don't feel comfortable commenting in the chat right now. So I'm just going to check my Slack with Wendy, see if there's anything else I missed. Thank you, Catherine. Yes, of course, we can definitely. I think that would be better, Judy, just in an email to me, and I'll take a look at it right away if you shoot me that email. Let's see. Good, looks like that is good. Awesome. Yes, I'm super looking forward to, having some sense of normalcy. I think that's all we can do is control the controllable right now, right? We're in such a strange state of the world. So we appreciate all of your help and just aligning around the certainty that we can provide for filing your taxes and working with us too, because we're all in this together. And it's yes. So PPP applications. I think there should be some sort of info. Judy, it sounds like maybe we should set up a phone call separately, which you can always find my meeting link in my email signature. I know that I'm pretty booked up in January, but if you can't find something, Judy, just send me a few times and I'll jump on a call with you to walk through some of that. We're partly holding off on some of the PPP forgiveness because the new law that was updated. So if you paid us for a PPP application and our fees, well, if we end up not having to do as much work as we thought, we're refunding people for the PPP. So we're just kind of waiting for the forms to be all finalized. I know that the SBA was updating that. Thank you, Connor. I realize I've not issued. So you won't need to send us a 1099, but as a good business person with good admin hygiene, you should always ask for our W-9. We're a C corporation taxed as an S corporation, so you don't need to send us a 1099. And you also pay us, well, I'm not sure if you pay us through debit card or credit card, but if you pay anyone through credit cards, you don't have to pay. You don't have to send 1099s. Nice. Okay. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Hoy. Thank you, Connor. I think I'll just leave it there. And Judy, I'll make sure that Wendy and I get a time booked with you pretty quick. Mary, please shoot me a note if you need anything. I hope you all have a nice day. And yeah, just let us know how we can help.